Commander Vex'thor stood before the observation chamber, his 4 eyes blinking in synchronized disappointment at the specimen before him. The human designation M.Kane.746 sat motionless on the sterile white floor, appearing exactly as unimpressive as the preliminary reports had suggested. Vex'thor's upper lip curled in what his species considered a smile, but what would have appeared as a menacing snarl to any human observer. Record entry. Date cycle 47.892. Vex'thor spoke into his neural interface. Subject continues to display minimal resistance. Like the others, this one appears to have accepted its captivity with characteristic human resignation. These creatures truly are remarkable in their capacity for submission. The research facility hummed with activity around him. Through the transparent walls, he could see his team of researchers going about their daily tasks with practiced efficiency. The Station 7 Research Center was his pride and joy, the most advanced xenological study facility in the Graxion Empire. Its pristine corridors stretched for kilometers beneath the surface of outpost planet Key 238, housing hundreds of specimens from across the galaxy. But none had proven quite as disappointing as the humans. Commander Dr. Lyra Nexus, his head of behavioral studies, approached with an excited flutter of her luminescent appendages. The latest neural scans from M.Kane.746 have been processed. Let me guess, Vex'thor drawled, not bothering to look at the data tablet she held out. Below average cognitive function, limited problem-solving capabilities? The usual human characteristics. Well, yes, Lyra admitted, her glow dimming slightly. But there's something odd about the theta wave patterns during sleep cycle. Probably dreaming about their primitive entertainment broadcasts, Vex'thor dismissed with a wave of his primary hand. Forward the data to Professor Reigel's team. They're compiling a study on human psychological weaknesses. Security Chief Krax's heavy footsteps announced his arrival before his booming voice did. Commander, the new containment protocols have been implemented, though I hardly see the point. This batch of humans is even more docile than the last. Vex'thor turned to regard the massive security chief, whose armor-plated exoskeleton gleamed under the facility's bright lights. Protocol is protocol, Krax. Even if our current subject appears to be nothing more than a standard human male of approximately 30 orbital cycles. Inside the chamber, Marcus Kane maintained his passive posture, eyes downcast, shoulders slumped. The perfect picture of a broken spirit. Only the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth might have betrayed something else if any of his observers had been paying close enough attention. The Empire wastes too many resources on these studies, Krax grumbled, his secondary arms flexing unconsciously. The humans proved their inferiority when we took their outer colonies without a fight. This one's no different. Look at him. No natural defenses, no enhanced strength, no useful adaptations at all. Science requires thoroughness, Vex'thor replied smoothly. Every species, no matter how unremarkable, must be properly documented. Tech specialist Xena, prepare the subject for the next round of tests. The young technician nodded, her neural tendrils writhing with eagerness to please. As she approached the chamber's entrance, Vex'thor turned to address his assembled staff. Let today's log reflect that human subject M.Kane.746 continues to demonstrate the typical characteristics of his species: physical fragility, psychological malleability, and a complete lack of any meaningful resistance to authority. Truly, the humans are perhaps the least remarkable spacefaring race we have encountered. The staff nodded in agreement, their various appendages and sensory organs all focused on the seemingly defeated human in the chamber. None of them noticed the way Marcus Kane's eyes tracked their movements, cataloging weaknesses, noting patrol patterns, analyzing security responses. None of them realized that what they saw as resignation was actually patience. And none of them could have known that they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers, underestimating a human Navy SEAL. 3 weeks into the testing cycle, and Commander Vex'thor was beginning to feel the first stirrings of annoyance. The human subject, M.Kane.746, had failed every single advanced cognitive test in their arsenal. Not just failed spectacularly, in ways that seemed almost deliberate in their incompetence. He just stared at the geometric puzzle for 2 hours, Dr. Lyra Nexus reported, her luminescent appendages flickering with frustration. Then tried to eat one of the pieces. Fascinating, Vex'thor muttered, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. And the physical endurance trials. That's where things get strange, Lyra admitted, pulling up the data on her tablet. He consistently performs at the exact same level. Never better, never worse. The statistical probability of such uniform results is irrelevant. Vex'thor cut her off. Humans are simple creatures. Their performance metrics naturally fall within predictable parameters. Across the facility, tech specialist Xena was conducting another in the endless series of reflex tests. She pressed the stimulus button, sending a mild shock through the floor panels. Kane jumped, yelped, and fell over exactly as he had done the previous 12 times. Subject continues to display suboptimal response to basic stimuli, Xena reported dutifully, though her neural tendrils twisted with suspicion. Something about the human's clumsiness seemed too perfect, too consistent. Security Chief Grax watched the proceedings from his command station, mandibles clicking with amusement. Perhaps we should classify them as a pre-sentient species and be done with it. Did you see him in the problem-solving chamber yesterday? Spent an hour trying to open a simple lock mechanism by headbutting it. Professor Rigel, however, wasn't laughing. The senior researcher had been studying humans longer than anyone else on the station, and something about this one made his dorsal spines tingle. Commander, request permission to implement more challenging scenarios. Denied. Vex'thor replied immediately. The Empire's research protocols are clear. We progress through all standard testing phases before moving to advanced trials. He paused, watching Kane stumble over his own feet while trying to navigate a basic obstacle course. Not that this one shows any indication of being ready for advancement. But later that night, when the facility's lighting dimmed to simulate planetary darkness, something changed. The security feeds showed Kane sitting in his cell, as usual, staring blankly at the wall. But in the adjacent monitoring room, Xena noticed an anomaly in his vital signs. Heart rate steady at 50 beats per minute, she muttered to herself. During sleep cycle, her tendrils writhed as she pulled up previous data. Every other human subject they'd studied showed elevated rest cycle heart rates, usually around 70 to 80 beats per minute. Military training could account for the difference, but Kane's file listed him as a civilian office worker. The next day brought more peculiarities. During the daily exercise period, Kane tripped and fell against a support pillar. Nothing unusual there, except that the facility's vibration sensors recorded a pattern of impacts that, had anyone bothered to analyze them, matched perfectly with standard military tap code. In the nutrition center, he continued to amuse the staff with his clumsy attempts to use the automated food dispensers. None of them noticed that his seemingly random button presses were gradually mapping out the entire facility's power distribution system. The human remains consistently unremarkable, Vex'thor reported during the evening staff meeting, though I must note that subject M.Kane.746 displays even less aptitude than previous specimens. Recommend reducing testing complexity to accommodate. Commander Grax interrupted, his massive frame tense with unexpected concern. We may have an issue. 3 of our high-security access panels have reported unauthorized scan attempts. System malfunction. Vex'thor dismissed. These humans can barely operate their own primitive technology, let alone interface with ours. Run a diagnostic and clear the error logs. And Sir Lyra added, her glow pulsing with uncertainty. We've noticed some unusual patterns in his sleep cycle readings. The theta waves suggest that humans dream of eating and mating. Yes, we know. Vex'thor snapped. I want tomorrow's focus on basic motor function assessment. Clearly, we've been overestimating their capabilities. As the meeting dispersed, Kane sat in his cell, eyes closed, breath steady. To any observer, he appeared to be sleeping. In reality, he was mentally reviewing the facility's patrol patterns, security rotations, and emergency protocols, all gathered from weeks of playing the fool. In the darkness of his cell, Marcus Kane allowed himself a small smile. 3 more days until the facility's monthly power cycle reset. 3 more days of watching them underestimate him. 3 more days until they learned why humans had survived countless predators on their homeworld. Not through strength, or speed, or natural weapons, but through patience, observation, and the ability to turn any environment, even a prison, into a weapon. The revelation came during what should have been a routine medical scan. Tech specialist Xena was running her daily diagnostics when her neural tendrils suddenly went rigid with shock. The human's bone density readings made no sense. The skeletal structure showed clear signs of advanced military enhancement procedures, completely at odds with his supposed civilian background. Commander Vex'thor, her voice cracked with panic as she slammed the emergency communication button. The subject he's not. The door to the medical bay hissed open. Kane sat up slowly on the examination table, his practiced clumsy movements suddenly gone. His eyes, previously vacant and unfocused, now held the cold, calculated look of a predator. Not what you expected. Kane's voice was different too, no more mumbling or confused tones. Each word cut like a blade. I was wondering how long it would take you to notice. Zena backed away, her tendrils writhing in terror. Kane hadn't moved from the table, but somehow his stillness was more threatening than any aggressive action could have been. Security Chief Grax burst through the door, weapon drawn. Step away from the technician, human. Kane smiled. Not the vacant grin they'd grown used to, but something that made even Grax's armored exoskeleton feel inadequate. Sure thing, Chief. Just like we practiced in those reflex tests, right? What happened next would be debated in xenobiological research circles for years to come. Kane moved, but not with the clumsy stumbling they'd documented for weeks. His motion was liquid grace, combat-trained precision that their sensors could barely track. Before Grax could fire, Kane had already closed the distance. The security chief's massive frame went flying across the room, his own momentum used against him with devastating effect. The weapon clattered to the floor, where Kane's foot casually pinned it. Impossible. Commander Vex'thor's voice boomed through the facility-wide comm system. Security teams to medical bay. Full containment protocols. Kane's laugh echoed through the chamber. You know what's really impossible, Commander? That the mighty Graxion Empire never bothered to check what SEAL team I served with before filing me as a civilian office worker. Professor Rigel, watching through the observation window, felt his dorsal spines flatten in recognition. Navy SEALs, Earth's elite maritime special operations force. How did we miss? Because you saw what you wanted to see, Kane answered, though Rigel hadn't spoken aloud. Just like you missed the fact that I've spent the last 3 weeks mapping every inch of this facility. Alarms blared throughout the station. Security teams scrambled, their formations precise but ultimately useless against a threat they'd never truly understood. Kane moved through them like water through a sieve, each perfect defensive maneuver making mockery of their combat training. In the command center, Vex'thor watched in growing horror as his carefully maintained research facility descended into chaos. Lock down all sections. Release the containment gas. Already disabled, Kane's voice came through the comm system, their comm system, which no human should have been able to access. Along with the backup generators, emergency protocols, and that nasty little self-destruct sequence you thought was so well hidden. Dr. Lyra Nexus, her glow now pulsing with fear rather than curiosity, accessed Kane's complete file, the real one, not the sanitized version they'd been given. Commander. According to this, he's not just a SEAL, he's a combat instructor, expert in neural warfare, tactical adaptation, and oh no. Let me guess. Kane's voice held a hint of amusement now. The part about facility infiltration specialist? Yeah, that would have been useful information about 3 weeks ago. Through the security feeds, Vex'thor watched his perfect research station fall apart. Years of assumptions about human capabilities crumbled as quickly as his security measures. And somewhere in the chaos, a highly trained human operative was systematically proving every one of those assumptions wrong. The hunter had become the hunted, and the nightmare was just beginning. The Station 7 Research Center's auxiliary power grid crashed at precisely 03000 hours. In the momentary darkness before the emergency systems engaged, Marcus Kane made his move. 3 weeks of playing the fool had given him intimate knowledge of every backup system, every security protocol, and most importantly, every weakness. Section 3 containment breach. A panicked voice echoed through the command center. The human test subjects, they're organized. Commander Vex'thor's 4 eyes darted between security feeds. The other humans, the ones they'd actually thought were docile, moved with military precision through the darkened corridors. Impossible. Their holding cells were separately controlled. Sir, Dr. Lyra's voice cracked with realization. Those maintenance accidents last week, the power fluctuations, Kane was communicating with them through the electrical system. In Detention Block C, Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, formerly classified as Subject H.892, led her group with the expertise of a Marine Corps veteran. Kane's tapped messages had prepared them well. Years of xenological research had taught the aliens everything about human biology, but nothing about human adaptability. Security Chief Grax coordinated his forces from the medical bay, nursing 3 broken ribs from his earlier encounter. Teams 7 and 9 converge on Block C. Team 4, secure the weight. Where's Team 4? Currently locked in their own detention cells, Kane's voice responded through the comm. Don't worry, I left them some of that nutritional paste you've been feeding us. Though I think the one with tentacles might have trouble with the spoon. Professor Rigel frantically accessed the central database, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The files were there, all the warning signs they'd ignored. Kane's perfect test scores, too perfect. His seemingly random accidents that always occurred near crucial systems. The way he'd played into every single one of their preconceptions about human limitations. Commander Tech Specialist Zena's neural tendrils twisted in alarm. He's in the environmental control system. Oxygen levels are being adjusted throughout the facility. Kane's voice came through again, calm and almost conversational. Fun fact about your species: you need a higher oxygen concentration than humans. Not immediately lethal when lowered, but definitely makes you sluggish. We learned that during week 2 of my stay here. Through the corridors, security teams found themselves moving slower, their reactions dulled. Meanwhile, the humans, led by Kane's precision planning, moved with unhampered efficiency. Each group had specific objectives, targeting systems and weaknesses Kane had identified during his weeks of observation. Look on the bright side, Kane announced as another section fell to the human advance. Your research on human capabilities is getting much better data now. Might want to update those files about our problem-solving abilities. In the xenobiology lab, Dr. Lyra watched in fascination despite her fear. The humans moved like a single organism, covering each other's weaknesses, maximizing their strengths. Commander, they're not just escaping, they're systematically dismantling our entire facility. Vex'thor slammed his fist on the command console. Release the combat drones. Already reprogrammed, Kane replied cheerfully. Though I appreciate you finally giving me a challenge. Almost had to try during that one. The security feeds showed the full extent of the chaos. Lieutenant Reeves' team had secured the armory, their movements suggesting prior knowledge of the facility's weapons. Another group, led by former UN peacekeeper James Rodriguez, had taken control of the communication hub. Even the civilian subjects were contributing, years of watching their captors giving them insights into alien technology and procedures. Sir Crax's voice was heavy with resignation. We've lost contact with the surface teams. And the humans have accessed our tactical databases. Kane's voice returned, now with an edge of steel beneath the casual tone. Really impressive stuff in here, Commander. Detailed analysis of human pressure points, pain thresholds, psychological weaknesses. Almost like you were planning something bigger than simple research. Professor Rigel felt his dorsal spines flatten, completely a sign of absolute submission in his species, the invasion protocols he knows. Bingo. Kane's tone was almost cheerful. So here's what's going to happen. In about 10 minutes, my teams will have full control of this facility. In 11 minutes, we'll have access to your subspace communications array. And in 12 minutes, every human world in this sector will know exactly what you are planning. Vex'thor watched helplessly as his remaining security forces were systematically neutralized, not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through careful planning, teamwork, and the one thing his research had never accounted for: humanity's endless capacity to adapt and overcome. Commander. Kane's voice was almost gentle now. You spent so much time studying our weaknesses, you forgot to consider our strengths. Humans don't just survive, we learn, we adapt. And we prepare. Every test you ran taught us about you. Every restriction showed us your vulnerabilities. And every moment you spent underestimating us was another moment we spent planning. The facility's main lights flickered, then stabilized at half power. Through the command center's windows, Vex'thor could see humans moving with purpose, securing positions, establishing control. His perfect research station had become their perfect staging ground. And somewhere in the chaos, Marcus Kane allowed himself a real smile. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, but more importantly, humanity's first counteroffensive against the Graxion Empire was about to begin. Station 7's central command hub blazed with emergency lights as Commander Vex'thor watched his world crumble. The Graxion Empire's most advanced research facility had transformed into a fortress, but not for its original masters. On every security feed, humans moved with precision, securing sections with military efficiency. Perimeter breach in Section 12, a panicked voice crackled through the comm system. They're not just taking control, they're improving our defenses. Kane's voice responded, cool and professional. Your barrier shielding had a frequency overlap in the gamma spectrum. Amateur mistake. We fixed it. Security Chief Grax, now coordinating from an emergency bunker, watched in disbelief as the humans systematically reorganized the facility's defensive grid. Sir, they're not disabling our weapon systems, they're optimizing them. Of course we are. Lieutenant Reeves cut in on the command frequency. You think we spent 3 years as your test subjects without learning anything? Your targeting algorithms are decent, but your response time needs work. Professor Regal's research team huddled in the xenobiology lab, watching their monitors in fascination. The humans had split into specialized teams, each focusing on different aspects of the facility's systems. Former civilian engineers worked alongside military personnel, applying their combined knowledge of human and alien technology. Look at their coordination, Dr. Lyra whispered, her luminescence pulsing with a mixture of fear and academic interest. Every team supports the others. They're not just fighting us, they're evolving our own systems. The first Graxion military response arrived exactly when Kane had predicted. 3 combat cruisers dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons primed for orbital bombardment. Incoming transmission from the Imperial Fleet Tech Specialist Xena reported, her neural tendrils twisted in knots of anxiety. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Vex'thor's imposing figure. Commander Vex'thor, your facility is compromised. Prepare for immediate sterilization protocols. Kane's laugh echoed through the command center. About that, Admiral. Remember those planetary defense cannons you thought were offline for maintenance? Turns out your encryption wasn't as good as you thought. The Admiral's expression shifted as warning signals blared across his bridge. The station's defense grid, now enhanced by human modifications, hummed to life. But something was different. The targeting systems moved with an organic fluidity that no Graxion computer had ever displayed. Impossible, Admiral Vex'thor roared. Our systems are unpredictable, Kane finished for him. Just like your combat tactics. Did you know your fleet maneuvers haven't changed in 3 centuries? We learned that from your own historical databases. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Lyra stepped forward, her glow steady and determined. Admiral, before you fire, you need to see this. She transmitted a data packet, research findings that had been buried under years of prejudice and assumption. The humans, she continued, her voice gaining strength, they didn't just overcome our tests, they improved them. Every system they've touched in this facility now works better than our original designs. They're not destroying our research, they're advancing it. Professor Rigel joined her, his dorsal spines rising with newfound courage. She's right. Look at these results. Their adaptive capabilities, their problem-solving skills. We weren't studying them, they were studying us. Through the facility, more alien staff began stepping forward. Tech specialist Xena's neural tendrils straightened with resolve as she showed how the humans had optimized her beloved systems. Even Security Chief Grax grudgingly admitted that their combat modifications were tactically brilliant. Commander Vex'thor watched in amazement as his own staff began collaborating with their former test subjects. The humans, led by Kane, didn't reject their help. Instead, they incorporated each alien's expertise into their plans, creating hybrid solutions that neither species could have developed alone. Your choice, Admiral Kane announced, his voice now carrying the weight of authority. You can either start an interstellar war right now, one where we've already proven we can adapt and overcome your advantages, or you can recognize that humanity has more to offer than you thought. The command center fell silent as everyone waited for the Admiral's response. The defense cannons remained locked on the Graxion ships, their targeting systems now a perfect blend of alien technology and human intuition. But it was Professor Rigel who spoke next, his voice carrying the wisdom of years of research. We thought we were studying their weaknesses. Instead, we discovered their greatest strength, the ability to turn adversity into advantage, to transform enemies into allies, and to improve everything they touch. The Admiral's hologram flickered as he processed this new reality. His ships hung in orbit, weapons armed but holding fire, as humanity demonstrated its most powerful capability, the ability to change the rules of engagement entirely. The breaking point had come, but not in the way anyone had expected. In trying to understand human weakness, the Graxion Empire had inadvertently revealed its own. And in that revelation lay the possibility of something entirely new, a future where human adaptability and Graxion technology might together create something greater than either civilization had imagined. Commander Vex'thor stood in his private command chamber, watching as decades of certainty crumbled around him. The facility's neural interface sparked and fizzed, damaged by the humans' modifications, but he had one last card to play: the station's quantum core, a failing safeguard that would take everyone with it. "You know what I find interesting?" Commander Kane's voice echoed through the chamber as he stepped through the doors. "Your species spent so much time studying our weaknesses that you never noticed your own." Vex'thor's 4 eyes narrowed as he faced the human. "Our weakness? We conquered 3 galaxies while your kind was still learning to make fire." "And that's exactly your weakness," Kane replied, moving with casual confidence. "You stopped learning, stopped adapting. Everything became about protocol and procedure. Tell me, when was the last time the Empire actually innovated?" The quantum core hummed behind Vex'thor, its pitch rising dangerously. "Innovation? We perfected our civilization millennia ago. What could we possibly learn from primitives like you?" Lieutenant Reeves' voice came through the comm core. "Destabilization detected. He's trying to overload it." Kane didn't even flinch. "You already know what you could learn. Your own staff figured it out. Ask yourself why they're working with us now instead of following your orders." Through the chamber's windows, they could see humans and aliens working together, their combined expertise racing to contain the core breach. Professor Regal's knowledge of quantum mechanics melded perfectly with Rodriguez's emergency containment experience. Dr. Lyra's insights into energy patterns complemented tech specialist Zena's system expertise. "This is the moment," Commander Kane continued, stepping closer. "Right now, you're seeing humanity's real strength. Not our muscles, not our speed, not even our technology. It's our ability to adapt, to cooperate, to take the best of everything we encounter and make it better." Vex'thor's hand hovered over the final override. "You're nothing but test subjects. Laboratory specimens." "We were," Kane agreed. "And we learned from every test. Every experiment taught us more about your technology. Every observation showed us your procedures, your psychological assessments. They taught us exactly how your people think." The quantum core's whine reached a fever pitch. Warning signals blared throughout the facility. "Core collapse in 60 seconds," Krax announced, his security training warring with his newfound respect for human capabilities. Kane never broke eye contact with Vex'thor. "You have a choice. Right now, be remembered as the commander who nearly destroyed his own facility out of pride, or be the one who saw the future and embraced it." "The future?" Vex'thor scoffed. "What future could there be in cooperation with lesser beings?" "Look outside," Kane gestured to the window. "Your best researcher is working with a former human test subject to contain a quantum breach. Your security chief is coordinating with marine tactics. Your systems expert's neural interface is linking directly with human strategic thinking. Tell me that's not a future worth exploring." The core reached critical levels. Vex'thor's hand trembled over the override. Decades of imperial doctrine warred with the evidence before his eyes. 10 seconds to core collapse. Multiple voices, human and alien, called out in unison. In that moment, Vex'thor saw what his research had missed all along. The humans hadn't just survived their captivity, they'd turned it into an opportunity. Every weakness they'd shown had been carefully chosen, every failure deliberately planned. And now, faced with destruction, they weren't fighting or fleeing, they were trying to save everyone, including their former captors. His hand moved away from the override. "Core stabilizing," Reeves reported, relief evident in her voice. "Containment holding at 97%. Kane nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Welcome to the future, Commander. Ready to learn something new." Around them, Station 7 hummed with renewed purpose. Not as a research facility studying human weakness, but as the first true collaboration between species. In trying to understand humanity's limits, the Graxion Empire had instead discovered humanity's greatest strength, the power to turn any situation, even defeat, into an opportunity for growth. The era of observation was over. The age of cooperation had begun. 1 month after the Station 7 incident, the Graxion Empire's Supreme Council received an unprecedented joint presentation. Commander Vex'thor and Marcus Kane stood side by side before the assembled leaders, presenting findings that would reshape interstellar relations forever. The former research facility had been transformed into the first human Graxion Cooperative Institute, where once there were test chambers, now there were joint training facilities. The observation rooms had become collaborative laboratories where both species worked together, each bringing their unique perspectives to solve previously impossible challenges. Our greatest mistake, Vex'thor addressed the council, his 4 eyes bright with newfound wisdom, was believing that understanding weaknesses was the key to advancement. The humans showed us that true progress comes from combining strengths. Kane nodded in agreement. The future isn't about who's superior or inferior. It's about what we can achieve together. Throughout the Empire, research protocols were rewritten. The emphasis shifted from studying potential adversaries to seeking potential allies. Each new species encountered was now seen not as a subject to be analyzed, but as a partner with unique contributions to offer. And in the halls of Station 7, now renamed Unity Station, humans and aliens worked together, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from studying differences, but from embracing them. The Empire had sought to understand human weakness. Instead, they discovered the greatest strength of all: the power to turn enemies into allies and fear into hope.